am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Allan Koltin. He is the CEO of the Koltin Consulting Group, a Chicago-based consulting firm that specializes in working with professional and financial services firms in the areas of practice growth, practice management, human capital, and mergers and acquisitions. He is highly sought for his ability to engage and inspire audiences and enjoys delivering keynote addresses at conferences throughout the professional services industry. For 22 consecutive years, he has been named by Accounting Today as one of the top 100 most influential people in the accounting profession. In 2022, he was listed as the third most influential in the profession and was also voted one of the 10 most recommended consultants for the 20th straight year in the annual survey of firms conducted by Inside Public Accounting. For the past decade, Allan has also been named by CPA Practice Advisor as one of the top 25 thought leaders in the profession. In 2016, he was inducted by CPA Practice Advisor into the Accounting Hall of Fame. He was also one of the first to be inducted into the Accounting Marketing Hall of Fame by the Association for Accounting Marketing. He has also been a recipient of the National Association of Certified Valuation Analysts Instructor of the Year Award and winner of the Journal of Accountancy's Literacy Award. Previously, he was recognized by the Illinois CPA Society with the Distinguished Service Award for outstanding service and commitment to the profession. Now, from a personal standpoint, he also attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and received degrees in accounting and marketing. He lives in Chicago with his wife Sharon, his 3 children, Jack, Brian, and Julia, and his 2 dogs, Bucky and Cody. His hobbies include travel, chess, and all sports. And we talked about all of this on this episode with all of those accomplishments that Allan has. In his interview, we talked about how he learned the skill of relationship building by watching his parents, who were in the hospitality industry and real estate industry, as he grew up. We also got into his background in chess, which was fascinating, and how he was the #1 chess player in the country growing up, and was also an accomplished basketball player, which he's been able to keep up throughout his life. We discussed the lessons that he's learned, that he has been able to achieve success because of these lessons over time, and envision what is possible. And by using that vision and that strategy, he helps others to find their own vision as well. I hope you enjoy this interview with Allan as much as I did. There's so many nuggets of great content in here to help you when you're thinking about strategy, when you're thinking about your future, and how you think about your backstories and how it's helped you in your success today. I'm so excited today to be with my friend Allan Koltin. And to get started, if you don't know Allan, which I'm sure you do, but we'll just have Allan introduce himself and what he does.
Thank you, Amy. So excited to be with you. I live a boring life. I'm an accountant, right? But it could be worse. I could be an actuarial.
I would not define you that way.
In the 80s and 90s, we were in Chicago here, part of one of the country's fastest growing accounting firms. In those days, to go from 0 to 50 million and be the 13th largest in one market was sort of unheard of. But that's what we did. We sold the accounting firm in 1998 to H&R Block, when, as you know, they wanted to go from the low end of the food chain to the high end. But we had started a company in the 80s called PDI, eventually PDI Global, and we became the largest consultancy, publishing company, and training company for the accounting profession. We had about 1,000 CPA firms as clients, and we did everything from sales and leadership training to publishing industry newsletters and year-end tax guides, and did training on what we call today the soft skills. We had a program on how to become a profit improvement consultant, how to facilitate meetings, all those kinds of things. and bought the company back in 2008 from H&R Block, and then sold it again to Thomson in 2011. And since that time, which is now 12 years, I have been consulting pretty much to top 500 accounting firms on strategy, growth, compensation, profitability, governance, partner stuff, as we like to call it, leadership, succession, and M&A. So that's the
quite a journey. Yeah. And so I'm very excited to get into it, and I'm sure our listeners are as well. So why don't we just start in the beginning? So where did you grow up? And tell me a little bit about your family. What did your mom do? Your dad do?
Oh my God, this is so
Yeah.
cool. You're gonna love this. So they are my guiding light. My mom had those magical 9 words, which they're still alive today, 93 and soon to be 90, 94.
Wow.
And she always used to say, Allan, you can do it. I know you can. And I sometimes cry when I say this because I can't tell you how many times this kid of below average intelligence failed and failed again and failed again. As a sidebar, I have the state of Wisconsin record, 2 records, as I'm told from the Dean of Wisconsin. I have the record for most number of flunked CPA classes. And I have the record for, believe for most number of times failing the CPA exam. And,
How many?
I enjoyed it so much. I did the experience 4 times.
Yeah,
So,
I did too.
Oh, you did? Well, thank you for making me feel good.
Yeah, at the time you couldn't, you had to pass 2, and then they get like at least a 50 on one of them or something like that. And I know the first time I passed 2, but didn't get the right failing grade on the 4th one.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to say it, because it's like so many people that go through the test think they're the only ones. Once you're a CPA, you just say you're a CPA. So
That's it. And well, I thank you for sharing that, because it's good to know. But it didn't seem like a conspiracy. Whatever you studied, they didn't have on the exam. It was something completely foreign. And why do they do that?
I know, just to trick you. Yeah.
So Milwaukee is where it's at. It
Okay.
makes, even though I've lived in Chicago for 40 years, it makes me a cheesehead for life. I'm a diehard Packer, Badger, Brewer, Bucks fan, and that's my roots. I love it there.
And what did your parents do? What were their occupations?
They were in sales, and my dad was in the hotel hospitality business for some time, and then he was in home remodeling for a while. And my mom went back to college after the kids grew up, and she went and got a real estate license and sold residential real estate. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was the 1980s, and interest rates were 20%. And the sky was falling, and they said, look, we'd love it if you could be a doctor, but if you're not smart enough to be a doctor, at least be a lawyer. And if you're not shrewd enough to be a lawyer, at least be an accountant, because you'll always have a job. And they were right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. I had a plaque over my bed that said, "Don't tell your daughter to marry a doctor or a lawyer, tell her to be one." But I'm an accountant, so.
Oh, that is hilarious. Yeah.
So how much were you involved with what your parents did and their occupation?
Wasn't that involved, but clearly sales skills. I watched them closely, and what I watched is probably them do it the right way, never selling a product or service, but being committed to helping people. And that old adage, people don't care how much you know till you know how much you care. They were always, what I admired was after sale, they stayed in touch with those people because they built friendships. And it was almost like friends first, business second. And that became sort of a mantra for me of people I was going to meet in business. Build a personal relationship. Otherwise, you know what? You're just a vendor.
Right.
And there's no special sauce there.
Yeah. And people know you care.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Like you're in it for their personal interest, not just your own.
Yeah. And Amy, I've obviously read everything you've ever written, all your books, and hope pretty soon now Hollywood will come in and we'll be doing a
That's
movie.
right.
I would say that's
Make
your
that
most.
deal for me, Alan. That'll be
Hey,
your next career.
it starts with a dream. It comes
That's
to
right.
reality through a book, and then the movie is sort of the icing on the cake. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So do you have siblings?
I do. I've got a older brother, Howie, who's just turned 69 this week. And as a little kid, Howie was the number one chess player, probably in the country. I can't remember where he ranked.
Wow.
He took me under his wing and taught me the game of chess growing up as a kid. And ultimately, I would win the Wisconsin championship
Oh my
and
gosh.
nationals. And what it taught me was something. I don't know if you ever saw Queen's Gambit on Netflix or any of
Oh,
the.
I did. I
Yeah.
started that. Yeah.
So what it teaches you is the power of being able to visualize and think ahead 3, 4, 5 steps, anticipate what competition is going to do, create a decision tree on almost everything you observe and see, and attach probability to it. And some say it's not surprising you went into accounting with that kind of linear thinking. But the way they would train you is you'd close your eyes and literally you'd look up in the sky, and there were 64 squares, and you had to know where everything was and where the game was going.
Wow.
Yeah. And in business, it's you don't skate to where the puck is, you skate to where it's going. So
Mhm.
it's a blessing and a curse to have that kind of skill, because at some point you have to make a decision, and the paralysis by
Yeah.
analysis can set in sometime. So you got to balance it.
Do you still play chess?
I do,
You
and
do?
I'm proud to say both my boys, Jack and Brian, have now beat me. Matter of fact, they can sort of kick my butt right now, and
Really?
it's different. They can play on the internet all day long. And
Mm.
there's always someone to play a game. And yeah, the days of getting them on the 2-move and 4-move checkmate just don't happen anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that interesting though? Like on something as traditional as chess, that technology actually helps people build the skill where you would think that's actually taking away from the human side of it.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting you say that, because great chess players can still beat the computer. Not
Uh-huh.
always, but
Right.
sometimes. And sometimes the creativity,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to dare to be different,
Right.
to sort of defy gravity, the ability of logic, sometimes can beat an algorithm. I mean, it's a crazy thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, and we've talked a little about your brother and his life before, just the two of us, but
Yes.
does he play chess?
Not anymore. Yeah,
Okay.
not anymore. Although I have a hunch if he played, he could still beat me. He's become more of a spectator fan. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you had a brother, you have another sibling?
Yeah. So Howie's the older brother. Kathy's the younger sister. She's the famous accountant, as we like to say. She was in public accounting, then private industry, and then one day the state of Wisconsin called her up and said, "We want to bring a non-government person in to run the business." And she elevated and did that, and today reports directly to the governor and runs sort of the administration of the state of Wisconsin. And it's
Wow.
interesting because it's like all states. There's the Democrat side and the Republican side, and they all like her because they say she's one of the few that can actually read, understand, and interpret for them budgets and financial statements. And she was an accountant by background.
And
So
isn't that the goal of a trusted advisor, right? Like
yes,
that's the
yes.
numbers. Yeah.
But that's so kind of you just to ask about family. Nobody ever does that, beyond
Yeah.
some germane business topic. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it all makes us who we are in business, right? Like these are the things that are our fabric, our quilt, that create who we are today, which you can see even before we even get into other things with chess, how much that
Oh my gosh.
has had an impact on your career as
And
well as your
And I
parents.
know you're going to ask about my wife, Sharon.
Yes.
And she I think I'm told I robbed from the cradle. There's a 9 year age difference. And it was, I did not get married until I was 37, which I think by those standards and even today's standards is a long time to sort of, be out there. And I saw her at an event. I said to my friend Mike, I'm going to marry that girl someday. And a couple of years later, that happened. And it's been 25, 26. I should know this better. 6 plus 23. 29 years. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. It's been a great journey. And obviously Jack and Brian I talked about as the older boys, and Julia, my prized possession, my beautiful daughter who's a junior in college, incoming senior at college, actually.
That's awesome. So besides chess, did you have any other hobbies when you were younger?
Hoops, basketball. It was
Okay.
every day on the playground, and loved it, loved it, loved it. I'm told by my peers I was a great shooter and a terrible defensive player. And they were right. It sort of was like the DH in baseball, but it was before anybody, thought like that.
Right. Yeah. So how long did you play basketball for?
All the way, believe it or not, up until my 50th birthday, played full court. And then we reduced from age 50 to 55 to what we call Sunday morning for the old men, and 3 in our backyard. And 2 broken arms and a couple hamstrings pulls, enough is
Exactly. So what can you think about, like with chess, how it's helped you in basketball?
Interesting. It's a great question. I never thought of the connectivity, but I think in terms of passing, sort
Mhm.
of knowing, and you see it in the NBA and college basketball, even high school today. And I didn't have the skill set, but I knew that you could pass to where they should go, and eventually they could figure that out too. So,
Mhm.
you could sort of know that, learned habits in
Yeah.
certain situations where the opportunity would be, and pass the ball there when no one was there, but knowing that they would be there.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, and that's not much different than closing your eyes during chess,
eh, you're right. You're
right?
right.
You're visualizing where the ball needs to be. You're just relying on some other person
Yes.
to get there.
Amy, I'm loving this. It's like a therapy session. I mean, I've never really, like, you've asked questions that in my entire life nobody's ever asked. And
Yeah.
yeah, that is interesting. I've never thought of the
Yeah.
connection between the two. Yeah.
Well, that's like an incredible skill to learn at an early age, because it's like training your mind,
Yeah.
where, and I think this in the accounting profession is one of those things that a lot of accountants don't think they're creative, but you have to be creative
Yes.
all of the time to, solve business issues, to innovate. And like you said, to kind of close your eyes and see where's it going? What do I need to do to get there? What is the strategy to get there? And we don't give credence to that creativity because it's not painting, it's not singing, it's, but it's still creativity.
Boy, that's so true. Yes.
Yeah. So using that, where you can find that master skill of how you use it in other areas of your life is so huge. So
Hey, I know you want to ask the questions, but I do have to ask one of you. How did you become such a fabulous public speaker? Was that something that was just natural? I've sat and I've watched you, and most people when they speak, no matter how many times they do it, there's a level of nerves and anxiety and relief after you're done. You literally just stay in the flow of whatever you're doing before you go do that. You go do something else, and it comes so natural. Was it always like that?
thank you. I appreciate that. That was very nice. So I have gone back to think about just speaking, and my childhood, I played violin. And I think violin is one of the most exposing instruments you could possibly play. So to prepare for recitals, you'd have to play by yourself, and there's no frets on a violin, right?
That's
And
right.
so just,
Yeah.
I had that I started playing piano, I think when I was 3, in Baldwin classes with the headphones, just learning, the art of performance, of not just playing, but also the slow, the fast, the loud, the quiet, all of that, I think really has helped me in bringing all of this together later in my life. That's what I
Yeah.
would go back to, because to get comfortable playing violin is hard. Even when you think you're having a good day. So, but thank you. That was very nice. So, okay, so where did accounting come in? So you didn't really have much of that so far, I'm seeing in your background. So was
Yeah.
there a relative that was an accountant? Was
I
there?
was I was blessed. I had a couple mentors that if not for them,
Mhm.
wouldn't be sitting here today. So the first one was an individual named Howard Schnall. He had a CPA firm in Milwaukee called Nankin Schnall. It eventually became the Milwaukee office of BDO.
Mm.
And he called me in. If I can tell you the story, you'll probably crack up. It was 6 months after I'd been there. Accountants are nice people. They never tell you when you're not doing a good job. I thought I was doing a pretty good job. I got summoned into his office and he says to me, he says, "So how do you think you're doing?" And I said, "I think I'm doing pretty good. Are you thinking of promoting me from staff to senior?" And he goes in his desk drawer and he pulls out the partnership agreement. I'm like, wow. And he says, "Why don't you take a look at paragraph 16?" And I go through it and I get to paragraph 16 and I see the header, and the header says mandatory retirement age of 65. That, "I think you gave me the wrong paragraph here." He says, "No, no, it's the right one. You asked me the question, Alan, how long is it going to take for you to get from staff to senior? And based on your age 65 mandatory retirement, you're not going to make it." He says, "And I've got good news and bad news." He says, "The bad news is you're the worst accountant we've ever had." He says, "You're fired." And I said, "What's the good news?" He says, "I want to hire you back on Monday in a new capacity." And this is like the early 80s. Like the Bates decision has just passed in public accounting. You can now do advertising as long as it's not misleading, false or deceptive. And he said, "You've got some special skills. They're not in accounting, but I'm going to sort of make you the assistant to the managing partner. And I'm going to also put you in charge of sales and marketing." And, in those days, those positions didn't exist.
Right.
But what he did was he taught me the business of accounting, which obviously I consult on today. But in those days, I was able to take those sales skills that mom and dad had and apply them. And in those days, if you were willing to knock on the door of a bank or a law firm or a potential client, no other accountant was out there.
Right.
Everybody was, doing the
Yeah.
work. So one day I remember he called me in his office and he said, "I've got a problem with you." And I said, "Uh-oh." And I said, "I think I know what it was. I went to that restaurant with that banker and I had a bottle of wine." He said, "No, no, no." He said, "We asked everybody in the firm to put a list of their contacts, business owners, bankers, attorneys that they know in the Milwaukee market. And you have more than any of the partners have. How could it be?" And I thought about it and I said, "Well, I worked at at a country club shining shoes, and every business owner and banker and attorney, I used to shine their shoes, and they would call me from the shoe shine room up to play basketball when they only had 9."
There you go.
And I thought about it like how it came natural
Hmm.
versus where accountants sometimes they put pressure on themselves, like, "Oh my God, I got to go to this event. I got to go meet people.
Right.
What do I say? I don't want to sound
Yeah.
pushy. Give them a business card." It's nobody ever told me like you're not supposed to do that. So
Right.
so what did he do? He married my skills of sales and marketing, and eventually that grew, and eventually a firm in Chicago that was a young startup called FERS, this other dynamic, Erwin Friedman, who was just a visionary beyond, I mean, incredible. He brought me in there and took me under his wings and told me, taught me the business at a much bigger firm, a much more progressive firm. And together we started PDI Global, which was that consultancy and publishing and training company to the accounting profession. And I always think back, if not for that accounting degree and the torture, the
Mm-hmm.
failure that I put myself through, I would never have earned the right to sit where I sit today.
No, it's
Yeah,
so
and
true,
probably
right?
ditto with you, right?
Yeah,
To
well, oh,
take
for sure.
accounting out. I mean,
Yeah,
for sure, you know.
yeah. I mean, it's absolutely true. And I think, there's so many times in college they put it in a box of tax or audit. And now in this day and age, like it would have been really exciting to graduate in accounting, just how many other areas with consulting is available to get experience in. But I think you come out thinking it's one thing, and this is a really important thing that Howard did for you, was say, I see potential. It's not here, it's here. And there's so few people that stop and look up to see where people's potential are, that they'll just be like, oh, they're not good at this, we need to get rid of them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
And
exactly.
and we need to make that time for, to give that time to people.
Amy, this is incredible. This is like you're doing a deep dive here, and I feel like I should send you a check or something for this. Like, mom and dad sort of framed it.
Yes.
Then they provided the "you can do it, Alan. I know you can." If one person believes you can do it, you do it. Howard basically saw a skill set that was untapped, took advantage of it, and then Irwin took it and put it on steroids.
Yeah.
And
And you had the drive to
yeah,
go after it too, because
yes.
a lot of people too, if they're told I'm not a good an accountant, might be like, well, screw you. But instead you were like, I'm gonna go after this. Like
Yeah,
like you have to have both. And I talk a lot about this with mentorship. Like sometimes we think of mentorship as one way, but if there's not like the business decision together of how you're both gonna work toward it, it doesn't work.
engagement. Yes. But
Yeah.
as I'm reflecting on my story, and I know this is about me, not you, but my story is nothing compared to your story. If anybody's listening and you haven't read Amy's books, including the most recent one, it is absolute must reading. If you ever thought you were having a bad day, you thought your life was tough, or you didn't like the deck of cards you got dealt, read Amy's book. I mean, you talk about your resiliency, your persistence, and never ever, no matter what, giving up. I mean, that's admirable. I mean, everybody raves about you as a person, but when they read the books, I think it's like they really see like the reality of what you dealt with. And
Well, thank you. Well, and I think that's the point of this podcast too, is they see you as this major broker in the world of the profession and may think that just came to you, right?
yeah,
And there's such a journey there, and you didn't have anyone doing that in your background. It's not like you took over a firm that was doing this. This was a progression in your life of people seeing where your gaps are, where your strengths are, and you going after your strengths. I mean, the kind of evolution you've had is really awesome. And I think it's so important for people to see that, how does someone get to where they are at?
Amy, so what's the thing about when luck hits you,
Yeah.
and you have to be able to take advantage of it. So I was a consultant. M&A was not in the repertoire. It was a firm today known as Cohn Resnick. Back then, the one half of it was called J.H. Cohn. And Tom Marino, their legendary CEO, and Dom Esposito, who's since passed. He was a great consultant for the profession. And eventually on the other side of Resnick was Ken Baggett, who has also since passed. And they said to me, could you help us find opportunities? And I said, I don't think so. I've never done it before. And they said, well, you have all these relationships. Surely you could make a couple calls or make a couple introductions. And little did I know that that was the tip of the iceberg. I always wonder, like, if they hadn't planted that seed,
Yeah.
that would never have happened. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that is such a another big teaching point is there's so many times in your career that you're offered an opportunity and you're like, I've never done this before, and you may feel like I should just turn it down instead of saying, well, how would I go about this and go after it? And I think that's such a great example of just like, this is what I know I've got. I do have relationships. I may not know this, but I can open the door. And that's like step one, right? And instead of making it this big thing that I can't get over this hurdle, I can't take on this new opportunity, you focus on what you can do and keep adding to it.
Yes, yes, exactly. As the biggest sin that accountants have, and I talk about this all the time, is we're so busy being busy that we just can't see the light of day and figure it out. And it becomes like a trap door. And
Yeah.
I think they think goal setting is something the firm does or the practice area does. And we have to say, no, 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 this is you. And then what they do is they talk to you about production numbers and
Yeah.
statistics, and managed book of business,
Yeah.
billable hours, realization. I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, what about your skills, your dreams, your
Yeah.
passions?
Yeah.
Forget about the
Yeah.
numbers. When are you in that zone where you say, I love this? I would do it even if I didn't get paid, I could do this for the rest of my life. And that's the breakthrough. And so many practitioners miss it.
Yes.
They're almost like electricians, practicing their trade.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And liking to just do the work. And
Yes.
it is important to figure out also in your strengths. Do you like to do the work? Do you like to work on the business? There's two different skill sets, right? And if you're going to leave this business and you want to eventually be able to move your firm into these directions, you have to take those moments to close your eyes. Else you can't get there.
So that's what a great mentor, a great coach does.
Yeah.
People always ask me, what's the difference between leadership and management? And I say leadership is seeing something like chess that doesn't exist and having a strategy to create where you've never gone before. Management to me is something different. It's getting
Right.
results through others. It's getting people to a place they can't get on their own. Yeah, yeah.
So with you've evolved so much in what you do, from sales and marketing to this type of work in the PE space, which is, as we've talked, it's changed the profession so much so quickly. I think when we talked, you were like, there used to be one or two acquisitions a year, and
Yeah.
now look at what's happening. So maybe talk about your journey and how you've been able to walk through this change in your knowledge in this area to be successful with it.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. The adage, three strikes and you're out, but there's also three is a charm. I think it's something like
Yeah.
that. So PE, we tried in 2007 and 8. It failed dramatically. It didn't fail because of PE, but it failed because of the Great Recession of the summer of 2008. The capital markets were closed and it died. We went back in 2011 and 12 with a bigger PE firm. The first one was Mid-Ocean Partners. The second one was New Mountain Capital, and they had a premise and they had the resources. The problem was accountants didn't need capital, and they also didn't have the kind of uber profitability that they have today. And that fourth industrial revolution didn't exist. We could just keep grinding and grinding, doing compliance. As you know, today that everybody's trying to build consulting, advisory, outsourcing type services. 2020 was the perfect storm. Everything came together. But what also came together, which nobody could see coming, was the war for talent. I was at a conference this last weekend, and I heard two statistics that they're real. I don't debate them, but the last 5 years, 10% fewer accountants have gotten their accounting degree. There are half the accountants coming out today as there were 5 years ago. The other one is for every 4 retiring partners, there's only one replacement part. And you talk about the baby boomers all retiring up until the next 5 years. What are firms going to do? So private equity this time nailed it. It nailed it because accountants had to change. they needed capital, they were profitable enough to figure out a way to do a meaningful financial transaction, and they had to rebuild, you know.
Mm.
They had to be something more than a compliance shop. So yeah, it was a new skill set. I didn't have a PE client. Today, I think the last number is 57 of them, and everyone calls every week saying, "Where's my opportunity?" The problem, as you can imagine, is there aren't going to be that many deals entering the profession. Although I think by the time there are probably be about a dozen what we call platform firms and firms of all sizes, those will then go out and probably roll in the
Mhm.
next firms. So
Yeah.
yes, unlike the consolidators of the late 90s, H&R Block, American Express, CBiz, who was really the lone survivor, um, private equity will be in firms of all sizes.
Yeah.
And it's some are taking a wait and see attitude. Others are saying, I don't have to wait. I can see the results of, some of the ones that have been around, like Citron Cooperman and Eisner Ramper and Ryan Tax, and it's working
Mhm.
and it's doing the things they said. Yeah.
So, how do you have to use some of these skills that you've learned along the way, watching your parents, building relationships, strategy, vision, when you're dealing in two very different worlds? So, the way PE envisions business is very different than the way accounting firms envision business. And one of the things that I always think is awesome, but also hurts accounting firm partners is we're a very heart-based profession. So we
Yes.
hold on to clients forever, even if we're not making money on them because we've had them for 30 years, or, where a PE firm's going to look at that same thing and say, nope, like that's not the way we're going to, structure business in the same way. So how do you kind of work between the two mindsets? Because this is a very, you're the middle person to try to help explain what either person is thinking and how they think.
Yeah. So when I have the PE group meet with the accounting firm and we start doing strategic planning to really figure out culturally and strategically, do we have alignment of goals? I
Mhm.
put up a little phrase, and it's the balance between innovation and profitability. And I say to the PE firm, you're in it to make money. You want to grow EBITDA. You want to hold it for 5 to 7 years. And
Mhm.
by definition, that means you don't want to invest or spend.
Right.
Uh, you want to create more profit. And then I look at the accounting firm and say, the reason you're doing a PE deal uh, is because you need their capital to grow, to get into new products and services,
Or to
new
survive.
geographies. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, so do you see right away the two of you uh, have a different mindset? It's almost like an offense and a defense. One
Right.
is says no to spending, and one says we've got to build and grow.
Yeah.
So it's there where you figure out, can they truly align, and they put a plan together. And as you would have guessed, more times than not, they end up not doing a deal. But I always say, you know what? Sometimes the best deals are the ones that don't happen
Mhm.
because you're figuring it out. And what I've learned is, just like not every accounting firm is created the same, not every private equity group is created the same.
Mhm.
There's a group today that basically says the capital markets are closed. The cost of debt has doubled. We're coming into maybe the eye of a recession. We're out. There's a second group that says, that LOI we gave you 6 months ago, we can't honor it anymore because that big upfront cash payment, we can't afford it because the interest is doubled on the money. But we'll still make it up to you, but we got to spread it out over multi-years now. And then there's a third group that says, you know what? We made a commitment to you. The universe has changed. We don't care. We're going to honor it. Let's go get married.
Yes.
So they're just like accounting firms are all different. PE firms are all different. And it's not just on how they see economics. It's culturally how they're wired.
Mhm.
Some are wired to truly be your partner. And some, how do I say this in a nice way? They're wired almost like a bookie. They want to
Yeah.
make on the VIG, they want to make
All the
a
stats.
profit, and that's what drives them. So my advice always to the accounting firms is, you remember Real or Memorex? We have
Mhm.
to we have to figure it out because if we're going to get married, we're going to only do this once. We got to, we got to figure it out. Make
Yeah.
sure.
Well,
Yeah.
and I do think too, like it's a good point that more of them don't work out than do, because when something doesn't work out, you still learn from the process. And I know a lot of times too, it might be that going through the process, you realize, no, we want to stay independent, but we've got to change our business to stay independent. Now we've gone through this process, and this has been an eye-opening experience of what will it take for us to continue like this if we don't want to go down this path. And if anything, you're going to evolve, from going through the process.
So it's interesting. All of that is really high degree of difficulty.
Yes.
But separate from that, you have what we lovingly call the dysfunctionality of the partnership model, where everybody sits
Exactly.
around a table. And by definition, a third of those partners are absolute non-risk takers. Don't rock my world. I don't want to change. And right now we're doing well. So as we've talked about, the only time change happens in the accounting profession is when the status quo, when the change itself is deemed to be greater than the status quo. And right now, status quo pretty good. So you put all that together. I'm amazed sometimes that some of these deals actually get to a finish line.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things, again, if you don't think, like just you were saying about basketball, if you don't look at where you're going to pass and make sure you're going to be there in the future, then you're going to get passed over as well. Because when you need, it's just like insurance. When you need insurance, it's not there.
So Amy, so we talked about you with the violin, but we didn't talk about your favorite sport. What was that?
My favorite sport? Well, I now is yoga, if you call it a sport. But I grew up as a swimmer. Yes.
I have to ask you the question, any connectivity to what you learned from swimming and what you do today as a world-class yoga instructor?
Interesting. Swimming was very different, but so I would say the different part about swimming is it came very natural to me. Like I always feel like, and I would tell my kids this, keep trying sports till you find the one that fits, because a lot of times you keep pushing it because you really, like my older son loved baseball and he'd push and push and push. And he was a good baseball player, but he was never going to be the best baseball player, no matter how hard he worked. And it's like, you always find your thing. Yoga was one of those that went against the grain of that. I wasn't naturally going to slow down and be alone with my mind. And also I couldn't touch my toes when I started. So I thought it was more, you had to be a dancer, a gymnast, and, and so that one's actually taught me separately and I guess similar to violin, practice. If you enjoy something or you want to be good at it, it's all about practice.
Yeah, but it's one thing I've learned too late in life for sports. It's not just about practice, it's about perfect practice.
Yes.
Because a lot of times you can go out and say, oh, I practiced basketball for an hour. But if all you did was shoot a ball at a hoop, you didn't really accomplish anything. Yes. And if you broke it down to the skills necessary.
The drills. Yeah.
Yes, the drills.
The thing no one wants to do.
Yes.
And same thing with playing violin. I mean, when you see a orchestra concert, you see the whole thing put together, but rehearsals are the most grueling. You're playing one measure for an hour till you get it right. And so those are the things that no one wants to do because you want to do the end thing, All right. So what I like to do as a closing question is for you to pick a category, and I'm going to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions.
Oh my gosh.
So the category is family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Wow. Family and friends, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So things or actions I don't have with my family and friends that I want.
Things you said actions.
Yeah, or actions. Yeah.
Things that I don't have with family. It is more quality time together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't want to suggest it's not there, but it just seems like we're always just moving so fast.
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
blink and another chapter is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be to have more quality time and then to continue to find ways as everyone gets older and, does different things and goes to
Yeah.
college and has families. How do we keep that momentum going?
Connection. Yes. Okay. So things or actions I do have that I want to keep.
Um, wow, these are amazing questions. I think it's being there for your family and friends, truly being there, not because you have to, but because you want to. And it all stems from taking the time to understand them and listen to them and truly care for them. Uh,
Hmm. Yes.
Not just go through the motions. Be real. And
Mhm.
I think of it, old Allan Koltin had lots and lots of friends. It was sort of a quantity play. I think as you get older, it becomes more meaningful and it becomes a quality play of fewer but deeper relationships.
Yes. But you might have just answered the next question because that was things or actions I don't have that I don't want.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The one thing that I try to do well is look, not everybody is a class act. Sometimes people are just genuinely jerks or not
Yeah.
like. People roll their eyes and say, why do you spend time with them? And, I've always had this thing, and I think my parents instilled it in me, is believe it or not, there's good in everyone. And I always say to, like, when people say, I can't believe you spent time with that person, it's like I said, look at it this way. You leave them and you get to live your life, but they're stuck being who they are. They
Exactly.
don't intentionally sign up to be like that. It's
Mhm.
just a byproduct. So let it go, find
Yeah.
the good in them, and try to get them to a place of more good, you
I love
know?
that. Yeah. It's not about you.
Right, right. And
That is right.
that's
Yeah.
huge. That's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
When they say, like, someone was such a jerk to me, I says, look, we don't know what goes on in everybody's life. They
Yes.
may have just found out some terrible news.
Yeah.
It's not you. You just got caught
Yeah.
in the game crossfire, as we
Yeah.
say.
So thank you so much for sharing all your stories. You're so genuine always. And that's why I think you've built such a great career and relationships along the way. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to make sure that people walk away with
Yes,
before we
I
end?
want you to know that this was one of the best interviews I've ever participated
Oh,
in.
well, thank you.
This was spectacular. Thank you. I feel like it was a therapy session. I got 2 or 4 notes here of things to take away.
That's
Thank you.
awesome.
We're like the mouse on the treadmill,
Yes.
and the accounting gods keep turning it up.
Yeah.
And you were able actually to get me to slow down in that treadmill and think. And you gave me a couple things on my to-do list. So for that, I thank you, Amy.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for being here today.
Take care.
And now for my mindful moments with my interview with Allan. So many great things in this discussion that we had. I just think Allan is one of the most genuine, heartfelt people that I have ever met in this profession. I always enjoy my time talking with him. There's so much you can learn. And I just loved that we began with his love for his parents, and he called out a mantra or tagline or anything that has really given him the strength in his career to make sure that he found success. And he said that his mom always said to him, Allan, you can do it. You know you can. And I think that's so important to have that kind of support, even when you doubt yourself, or to just have the mantra that you need to tell to yourself when things are hard, when life gets hard, when things don't seem to be going in the way that you hoped that they would go, where you can give yourself that pep talk to change your outlook to find that positive outcome. And so we talked about him growing up and that his parents were really in a service-based industries where his dad was in the hospitality business and home remodeling and his mom was in real estate, and how watching them, he really learned about sales and sales from the side of really being committed to helping people after the sale as well and building that relationship, and how his parents stayed in touch and really became friends with the people that they sold to. And that personal care is something that's so important because people know that they can trust you. You're not just in it for the money, that you're in it for their best interest, and whether their best interest is to do what you're trying to sell or not, that you feel the same about them no matter what the outcome. So that being a really important piece of what he has carried with him in his own life of being in the sales and marketing profession in accounting. And so his background was in accounting, but really started moving into marketing and sales as his strength and realizing that was his strength early on. And so we started talking about some hobbies he had. And I thought a nugget here, knowing that he was the #1 chess player in the country. Growing up, he was taught chess by his brother, which is kind of a cool thing that not only did his brother teach him that, where they had that bond, but he's now taught his children as well and play with them. And I think that's just such a nice thing to have together, to share together, that all things that might be different about your personality, about your lifestyles, about whatever you chose, that you have this common place that you can come to, this common language. And common language of chess is really understanding, like he talked about, of how to visualize and think ahead, 4 to 5 steps ahead, to make sure that you're making the right decision right now. It's not just about right now. When we think about business, so many times we're making a short-term decision and things are going well right now, so why think about the future? Why change anything instead of really visualizing that? And I just loved what he talked about, closing his eyes when he would go into chess training and actually have to picture the chessboard and visualize that. And there's so much to that. And that is really mindfulness training, of truly allowing your brain to disconnect from a problem. So many times when you've got a hard business decision, or you're trying to come up with something at work or at home, and you just keep pressing against it and you can't get the answer. I know for me, I can go running and time just disappears. And all of a sudden, while I'm running, I'm solving an issue that I didn't even intend to solve. I wasn't putting my mind to that. It was just opening itself up to that. And we just lose the power sometimes of stillness, of just disconnecting and allowing ourselves to be okay to do nothing. And so for him to really talk about this skill in chess of closing your eyes and envisioning what you want to happen and how do you get there, there's so many ways you apply that. And we talked about how you have to figure out creatively to get to the end game that you want and think about different outcomes in order to achieve what you want. The other thing we talked about was his basketball career as growing up and how it's helped him as well in his career, that he's had a common bond at different places he worked or with different clients that also enjoy basketball. And sometimes we don't spend time talking about the things that we really enjoy outside of work and how we can collaborate with people that we work with in different ways, where we get to know people differently, which actually helps us in business. Because the relationship has changed. And because of that change, we know people at a personal level and can help guide them differently. He also talked about 2 mentors that were really integral in his career that really pointed him in the direction that he is today. And we talked about how important it is to be, as a mentee, open to listening and not taking offense sometimes. So when a mentor points out where your gaps are, but where your positives are, and maybe that wasn't your original intention, how do you walk toward that versus away? And he has definitely been the example of walking toward where people were actually stopping, giving their time, giving him advice, pushing him forward, but he had to want to push forward as well without putting the heels in the sand. And a lot of times we put heels in the sand because of fears that we have. We don't even realize what those fears are. And it's really important to identify if we're putting heels in the sand and not moving forward, why? Asking ourselves why, closing our eyes and asking ourselves why. And this really applies even in what Allan does today, as far as working with private equity and helping firms be able to go this new route if they choose. How do you close your eyes and just look at what's possible in your future? What's your vision? How are you going to get there? And what kind of skill sets are you going to need to survive, whether you stay independent or whether you go this route as well? And make sure that you've looked at all the scenarios in your mind and that you press against those scenarios with other people and allow people to press against your outlook too, and be open to that feedback. Because if we want to be better, we have to be open to what each person has to offer and how we make something better together. And that is really this opportunity we have with what Allan was talking about during this interview, of really being able to see things that aren't there. And sometimes we don't even know why we see those things. It's called our intuition, but we call it gut. Gut can tell us that something's off, and gut can also tell us that there's something more. We just haven't figured it out yet. And sometimes we rush that process of trying to figure that out instead of just allowing ourselves to go on that journey without any pressure of time, but making sure we are putting time against finding what those answers are, that we're not just thinking it's going to happen, that we do disconnect enough in order to provide that stillness, close our eyes when we need to, and envision that future. I want to thank you for listening to this interview. I'm sure you got a ton out of it. I love hearing Allan speak and all of his stories. If you want to find any more of our interviews, we've got tons of these interviews with leaders all over this profession and other professions as well, their life journeys that you learn from. So you can find us on any podcast channel, also on amyvetter.com, and the Breaking Beliefs podcast is listed there as well. If you also are looking to go deeper on this journey yourself, my recent book, Disconnect to Connect, Tap into the Power Within You to Create the Life You Desire, is released. It's an Amazon bestseller, and it definitely can help you start on this journey so that you can not only create the energy that you want for yourself, but the energy for those around you as well. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.